Hello everyone, welcome to XJ's History channel. This is Xiaofan.
This is Jonathan.
Today we're going to talk about algorithm.
Wait, algorithms? I thought we were going to talk about history.
Well, algorithms can shape history. Have you heard of a story that one algorithm killed the whole Wall Street and led to the 2008 financial crisis?
Wait, I thought it's the evil banker's fault.
It is the banker's fault. The story is that this one guy, a math genius, designed an algorithm to figure out a way to calculate a correlation between two, quote-unquote, independent events, such as how the rise of housing price in California will correlate with the housing price in Texas. The whole Wall Street adopted this algorithm to calculate risk for mortgages and of course failed miserably. The reason is that when this guy designed the algorithm, he only used data in the boom time. Of course the algorithm will fail to predict the bubble bust. Every time when he was called into the Wall Street office, he would explain the limitations of his algorithm, but no one seemed to care until 2008.
Whoa, algorithms seem to be so biased.
Exactly. Today, we are going to use two historical anecdotes to show everyone algorithm is really just a container for people who created and used them to carry out their worldviews. By examining the human biases behind the algorithms, we will see how the same global processes of colonialization and industrialization have both shaped the creation of algorithms and in return been shaped by it. Before going into the stories, let's first define the algorithm. What are some algorithms in your daily life, Jonathan?
Does recipes count?
They do. Algorithms are essentially cookbooks. It takes in a bunch of inputs. After a set of procedures, you get an output. By nature, they are structured, ordered, and automated. Here I have a recipe on my hand. It's called old eel pie. To bake eels, cut your eels about the length of your finger. Season them with pepper, salt, and ginger. And so put them into a coffin with a good piece of sweet butter. Put into your pie, grate raisins of the sunny, and an onion minced small, and so close it and bake it. Jonathan, how do you feel about this recipe?
This sounds so old-fashioned. Who eats eels in pies today?
Well, British people in 1600s did. This is a recipe taken from a cookbook published by John Murrell in 1615 England. West Europeans loved eels so much back then. England's King Henry I even died from eating a surfeit of lampreys. Now think about the seasoning mentioned in the recipe. Pepper, salt, and ginger. At that time, pepper can only be shipped from India and thus considered a luxury in Europe. It is also the reason that Columbus sailed to America because the Turks blocked the spice trade route. Ginger is another Eastern spice that Britain mainly imported from China or India. From the way British designed this recipe, the ingredients they used, I can feel the elegance and proudness behind. It's meant for the upper class British to demonstrate their power by saying, "Hey, we love using these exotic spices because we colonized them. Woohoo!" However, when the British colonists brought this recipe to America, the usage scenario for this recipe changed. Imagine you were one of those English colonists in New England in the 17th century. An eel pie was most likely served on a spring dinner with some winter savory from the garden.
Why a spring dinner?
Because back then, food availability was bounded by season. Eels usually swim toward the coast and enter the freshwater rivers in the spring from the cold Atlantic Ocean, which makes it perfect for harvest in spring. British colonists were elated to discover the abundance of eels in New England area, and eel pie soon becomes a family food, a classic dish on the colonist dinner table. Going through the steps of cooking an eel pie is less about elegance and pride and more. It's a cultural lingering through which the New England immigrants can exercise their remaining British identities one more time. Interestingly, eel pie seems to lose its favor when America becomes independent because its people consider it as a colonial legacy, a symbol that is practiced by the other. However, what's absent from the story is really how Native Americans consume eels. All we have heard so far is the British recipe, a colonial history, a story. But what about the cultural significance of eels to the natives? We never know.
Well, I'm amazed by how a simple recipe in colonial time could carry so much human intentionality and interpretation.
Right. Here I'm going to present you a second algorithm that lasts for centuries and impacts millions of people's life. It's called Fordism. Have you heard of the car company Ford? Yes, Fordism refers to the company's practice in the early 20th century to creatively divide people's labors into the smallest units and reassemble them again with the help of assembling line machines to improve efficiencies. Scholars later appropriate this word to imply broadly about the capitalist thinking and the social ordering behind this practice.
So, how is this related to algorithms again?
This is basically a nested algorithm. You see, Ford gave all workers a standardized cookbook so that even unskilled workers can carry out the work easily. Then Ford created another algorithm that takes human as input, and the automated machines parsed and combined their work to output cars. Traditionally, workers need to move from car to car to carry out their work. In 1914, Ford developed an endless chain-driven conveyors that moved the chassis around while the workers stayed at the same workstation. 3 months later, it invented a man-high line with all the car parts at wrist level so that workers can sit at one place and complete all the works. This invention dramatically improved the production efficiency, and all firms in the country started to imitate. But this model also caused a high turnover rate. Why? Here is a letter to Henry Ford from a wife of an assembly line worker in 1914. My dear Mr. Ford, I'm the wife of one of the final assemblers in your institutions, and neither one of us want to be agitators and thus do not want to say anything to make anyone else feel sad. But Mr. Ford, you do not know the conditions in your factory. We are all sure, or you will not allow it. Are you aware that a man cannot buck nature when he has to go to the toilet, and yet he's not allowed to go at his work? The chain assistant you have is a slave driver. My God, Mr. Ford, my husband has come home and thrown himself down and won't eat his supper. So down out. Can't this be remedied? That $5 a day is a blessing, a far bigger one than you know, but okay, they earn it. Please investigate.
So, how did Henry Ford deal with it?
Well, he came up with another brilliant algorithm that solved the problem. Perceived that an increase in wage will give his workers more power to consume the products they produced and facilitate the cycle of production. He doubled workers' salary to $5 a day, but with many strings attached. Workers need to spend half of the $5 in restricted manners that will ultimately benefit the company. In 1913, Ford Company established a sociological department to oversee its employees' spending practice and lives, including even the cleanliness and safety of their household. What a vision! Now he can program his workers' day-to-day life and control the directions of production input and consumption output of the whole society. This creation speeded up the cycle of mass production and mass consumptions in society and brought a boom time for capitalism and development.
But this letter was sent to Ford in 1914, so the problem was not solved?
Well, of course, the working condition problem is not solved, but the turnover rate problem for Henry Ford is solved. $5 a day is almost the highest pay in the country for unskilled workers. Poor people still rush to be recruited by Ford Company. No one cared about that poor woman's husband until 1927, the year Karl Marx published his famous book, Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1944. In his work, he elaborated the state that women described for her husband as the result of the alienation of labor. In easy words, he argued that when people used to work before industrialization, they can see how their labor turned into stuff they produce. This process has certain mental fulfillment in it. However, the division of labor in modern factories, such as what Ford did in their company, deprived this fulfillment of workers by alienating their labors in their work. Marx criticized this pattern of divisions and alienation heavily as the source of the evil of capitalism. With his work went famous in 20th century. Fordism, the ways of managing the social and economic system through standardization, mass production, and mass consumption, were accepted as the pillar that formed the critical narratives of capitalism.
Now I see. It's really about people behind the algorithms, the people who created, designed, and used them. It's amazing that this one business model or algorithm has shaped the way we perceive and define capitalism today.
Yes, with the more and more advanced technology today, algorithms hide everywhere in every product we use. Machines and algorithms help people carry out tasks easily, but also externalize people's responsibility. Remember the article I mentioned at the very beginning with the title that Recipe for Disaster, the formula that killed Wall Street? People blame the algorithm. Bankers try to develop better and more accurate models to predict the next bubble bust instead of reflecting on their greed. So if there's one thing I want the audience to take away from this radio is that it's always about people. Alright, thanks for listening
To XJ's History channel.
We will see you next week. Goodbye.